Welcome back to Creating Genius. Today, I want to start with a definition, which is going to lead into what I'm going to talk about. Resilience is defined as the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. A synonym for this is toughness. I personally like the definition of the capacity to withstand or recover quickly more than toughness, because toughness implies rigidity and, kind of this like forcing things, whereas resilience is, I see it more as kind of going with the flow and bouncing back from the things that we have to overcome. Resilience is something that's come up in my life many, many times. It's come up in overcoming my illness, where, the days were tough. I had to be resilient mentally in dealing with all the symptoms, but I also was working on the resilience of my body in overcoming the physical challenges that it had. I learned resilience again when I was studying for the MCAT at the beginning of my senior year in college, and through the process of getting into med school. The rejections, the interviews that didn't feel like they went well, the writing essay process, all of that tested my resilience. And now, as I've transitioned away from medical school and I'm building my own business and starting this podcast, I'm learning it again, just in a different way. When dealing with health issues specifically, our resilience on all fronts is really tested. Like I said before, physically, our body is tasked with recovering from exposures to all the things that we get exposed to during a day. There's food, smoke, perfume, cologne, mold, viruses. All of these things send specific signals to the body, activate certain genes involved in the processing of each of them. Even the healthiest foods need to be broken down, and that uses the body's resources. When I was at my absolute sickest, when I ate, my symptoms would get a lot worse, even if it was healthy stuff. And so for people in situations of chronic illness, even something that's healthy can be testing your resilience. Our emotional resilience is tested in situations of chronic illness based on all the different symptoms you have to face every day. It's really hard to wake up feeling hungover, even though you didn't drink a sip of alcohol last night. For me, it was the brain fog, the fatigue, pain, GI issues, depression, anxiety, all of the different symptoms and the combination of them that, I was feeling each day. It tested me mentally, because it was like, oh my God, like I wake up, I feel like dog shit, but I still gotta, try my best to do what I gotta do. Our emotional resilience is also tested, and that's based on how we interact with the people around us. Relationships with your parents, with siblings, with significant others, they take resources. And when challenges come up, because inevitably they do in interpersonal relationships, we have to have the resilience to bounce back from them. Relationships that are out of alignment can be really, really draining. One of the ways that I look at resilience is that anything that drains our resources can impact resilience. I'll give an example from my life here. When I was just starting to get healthy and going back into the world, every time I left my house and went to a new place, I risked some exposure to mold. My house was safe. We had the air filters. We tested it and everything, and it was good. But if I were to go to the gym, if I were to go to a restaurant, if I were to go to a friend's house, I risked exposure. And mold is tricky because a lot of the exposure is unseen. Obviously, like, there were places that I would walk into and I would see something on the ceiling and I would be like, I gotta get the fuck out of here as soon as possible. But a lot of times I wouldn't know that I had been exposed until hours later, when I would feel pretty crappy. Those little micro exposures, they wouldn't really put me in bed, and they wouldn't cause me to go back and really have the same flare and symptoms that I had at the beginning, but they definitely affected me, and specifically they affected my brain. I would feel it in how much emotional resilience I had. If I had, exposure, I could get anxious for seemingly no reason. I would be more reactive to my parents. I would have a lot more trouble learning and taking in new information. My brain its function just kind of went to crap. But not to the point where, I wasn't functioning, but it was just, things became harder. And my body's limited resources at that time, I didn't have the abundant energy that I do now. The resources that I had were put towards dealing with the environmental toxin, which was the mold, meaning there was less energy to learn, less energy to grow, less energy to have a deep conversation, or less energy to deal with being criticized. And I just found that it could affect the way I showed up in the world pretty significantly. In my experience being sick, my brain's resilience, like I kind of alluded to, was impacted the most. I would say the fatigue and the brain decline were the most important things I had to overcome when getting healthy. So through that, I became an expert in doing things that helped me improve my brain's resilience. Before I get into, some of the things that I did and some of the things that I recommend, I do want to say that there is no one-size-fits-all approach. I can only share what worked for me. I also want to emphasize that these tips can be used by people who aren't dealing with health issues. They are meant for brain optimization, increasing function, and they can be applied to anybody who wants to improve their brain's resilience. So the number one thing that I would say that impacted my brain's resilience was my diet. When I was struggling the absolute most, I turned to the one thing that I felt like I had the most control over. And at my really sensitive points, eating was really hard. I would be super hungry, but I also knew that if I ate, my brain would get super hazy, I would get really bad headaches. And because my symptoms were so neurologically based, I knew that if what I was eating made my brain feel better, probably a good thing. But I would also know, within a few hours or sometimes within a few minutes, if I consumed something that was not good for my brain. And, it was kind of a blessing and a curse situation where I got really good information about things that were quote unquote good and bad for the brain because my symptoms were so brain based, but also it was difficult because of the way it impacted how I functioned. And so my first tip here in terms of a brain optimization diet, this one might get me in a little trouble. But linoleic acid, or better known as seed oils, do seem to have a detrimental effect on the brain. These types of fats are really controversial because the studies on the effects of these fats overall on health are weird, to say the least. There are so many claims that there's no issues with omega-6s, linoleic acid, or seed oils, whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of claims that there's no adverse impacts on health. Here's the thing. The main study that I've seen cited or referenced on why linoleic acid is not bad for you doesn't actually look at linoleic acid concentrations. I'm going to link the study in the show notes for this, so you can check that out. There is clear evidence showing that we are consuming more of these seed oils, more of these types of fats in today's society than ever before. That study that I talked about that doesn't actually look at linoleic acid concentrations was saying how people with higher levels of omega-3s in their blood. So the study basically looked on the concentration of polyunsaturated fats in people's bloods. And it was an analysis of like 1,200 people from Italy. They looked at, I want to say, 4 or 5 different fats, and they compared them to inflammatory markers, all-cause mortality, and all sorts of things. They looked at, basically, the fats that they looked at were omega-3 fats, which have been shown to be healthy for us. They're good for our brains. They are good for the health of our cell membranes. There's pretty good evidence that the omega-3s are, in fact, good for us. This study only really looked at the omega-3s, and yet they were claiming that omega-6s are not bad based on evidence collected looking at omega-3s. And so, again, it's weird, and there are claims like that and sort of misrepresentations of these studies as to why people think that seed oils aren't bad for us. The interesting thing about this is what we thought this linoleic acid was being turned into the body, it might not actually be what it's being turned into. I'm not going to bore you with the biochemistry on this one, or I'm going to try not to. But one of the reasons why people thought seed oils were bad is that they would be converted into something called arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is absolutely necessary in the body, but it's been shown to cause inflammation when in excess. It can stimulate inflammatory cytokines and just cause an inflammation response. So the proposed mechanism for why seed oils are bad or linoleic acid is bad is that excess linoleic acid would be turned into excess arachidonic acid, and excess arachidonic acid is inflammatory. The thing is, the excess linoleic acid or seed oils does not seem to be turned into arachidonic acid. And so if this excess linoleic acid is not being turned into arachidonic acid, where is it going? What's happening to it? And we're not entirely sure where it's going. And studying this stuff in humans is difficult because, you can't just take a living person's brain and, I don't know, I guess you could take brain tissue out of it, but, things get weird when you want to look at what's going on inside organs and tissues of living people. But they were able to figure out that this linoleic acid enters the brain at a comparable rate to omega-3s. So we know the omega-3s are healthy. We know that we need a little bit of omega-6s. And we also know that they enter the brain at the same rate. On average, we consume about 10 to 20 times more linoleic acid than omega-3 fats. And if they enter the brain at similar rates, we are probably getting a lot more linoleic acid into our brains. And when it gets there, on average, 60% of it is put into a process called beta oxidation, which is how our body breaks down fats for energy. Everything that I've been told is that our brain runs on glucose and almost exclusively glucose. And it takes prolonged fasted periods for the brain to start using fats as fuel. Yet 59%, 60% of this linoleic acid, which is a fat, when it gets to your brain, is being put into the process of breaking down fats for energy. And so when we're breaking down fats to make energy anywhere in the body, they become more prone to becoming inflammatory. Breaking down fats for energy makes more ATP, but also generates more free radicals during this process of beta oxidation. These fats can also go through something called auto-oxidation, which causes them to just become free radicals randomly. And these free radicals are what cause the inflammation. And the brain is the last place that we want inflammation. I know that from experience. My brain was inflamed as heck, and I didn't feel great, to say the least. It seems like if you're consuming an excess of these omega-6 linoleic acid seed oil fats, they're getting to your brain, and they're being put into a process that breaks down energy, except the brain's not really using that for energy, so it seems like you might just be creating inflammation in the process of this. And, the other thing about the brain using fats for energy in fasted states is that I would assume that most of the exposure that you're getting from these seed oils, it's not like you're eating a keto diet where 70% of your calories is coming from canola oil. Their most common place is in packaged foods. It's with sugar, it's with proteins, it's with other nutrients that are going to take you out of that fasted/starvation state. It's very unlikely that you're going to be using these fats for energy, yet they're being put into your brain and they're being put through a process that's quote unquote supposed to be creating energy. It's very weird more than anything else, all of the research. To kind of take this into my personal experience, when I was sick, I completely, not on purpose, stopped eating any seed oils. Did I know what I was doing? No. I didn't say, I'm going to cut out all seed oils. But I do know that when I changed my eating, my brain started working better. And looking back, I think a part of it was that I was avoiding these inflammatory fats. Basically, the way I was eating was I found some vegetables that did not make me react or made me react as little as possible. I did some meat, which I didn't react super strongly to, some eggs, and I would have things like olive oil and ghee. I was not eating a whole lot of different things, but it was very clean, and it was really just vegetables, meat, and some healthy fats. And again, I think a big part of why eating this way helped me, just from, hindsight's 2020, may have been from avoiding these types of fats. For chronic illness especially, there's some really good research about ketogenic diets being good for your brain, and especially for anxiety, but in my opinion, they're very lifestyle dependent. I think, keto is a great tool, especially for chronic illness patients. I sort of did keto not on purpose, but, it's not something that in good conscience I can say it's good for everyone. It depends on your activity levels, it depends on your genes, it depends on a whole host of factors. I know that for myself, when I was able to incorporate more activity, and especially more intense activity, when I ate keto, or, just the way I was eating with vegetables, proteins, and fats, and not a lot of carbs, I would crash and burn. My workout just totally wiped me out. And then when I started to add some carbs in, that helped a bit. So again, keto, super high fat, low carb, it's a very personalized situation. I would need to know, your life situation to, in good conscience, be like, yeah, you should do this. But at the same time, I think it's pretty clear that these omega-6 linoleic acid seed oil things in excess is bad for your brain. And you can do keto without having an excess of these types of fats. You can also eat carbs and have a quote-unquote normal diet and reduce these fats. And it seems like in excess, they really are bad for your brain. And for people who say omega-6s are an essential nutrient, you are absolutely right. But it seems like if you have enough omega-3s, it vastly lowers the amount of omega-6s that you need in order to be healthy. And the great part about that is if you eat nuts, fish, or seeds, you're likely getting enough omega-3s and omega-6s for all of your needs. Grass-fed beef has enough omega-3s and omega-6s for any nutritional requirement that you need. So unless you are quite literally only eating fruit and raw vegetables, you really don't have to worry about getting enough omega-3s and omega-6s in your diet. We do absolutely need both of them, but that's not the point here. The point is that in excess, it seems like they're bad for your brain. And part of it is it's so unclear how they impact our brain that why would you take the risk? And again, from my personal experience, not eating them, my brain definitely, the function of it increased for sure. So in good conscience, I can say for people who want to improve the resilience and the function of their brain, I would cut down on those seed oils. So that's like vegetable oil, soybean oil, canola oil, looking for those in your processed foods. Restaurants is a big place where you can get them. And you know what? I'm not saying that you never have to consume them, ever. You can go out to eat once in a while. You can go out to eat a few times a week, and you'll be fine. But I think it's about reducing it. That's more important than being super, super strict. I don't love the dogmatic approach that a lot of these diets take, and especially a lot of the anti-seed oil fanatic people take. Again, I don't think it needs to be zero. I just think if you want to improve your brain function and you don't really know where to look, and you're eating a lot of things that come in a package and you eat out a lot, maybe check out how much, especially in the packaged stuff, how much of the seed oils you're getting exposed to, and cut down on it a bit. All right, moving on. Hopefully that doesn't get me canceled too much. Can't imagine it would, because I don't feel like that was I don't really feel like that's a controversial take, because again, it's not all or nothing. It's just maybe lower them if you've got a little brain fog. You want to be a little sharper mentally. That's it. Moving on. The next easy tactic to improve the resilience of your brain is going to be meditation. One of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite things to recommend to people, one of my favorite things to talk about. I posted something on Instagram a little while ago saying, Give me all the reasons why you can't meditate, and there's your list of reasons why you should, or something along those lines. And I really stand by that. The simplest benefit to meditation is that every time you sit down, you are overcoming your desire to do something else. And in overcoming those desires, you are building resilience in your brain. You are putting new synapses together. Whenever you make a new novel decision, you are telling your brain to fire in a different way. And every time you stay in the meditation till the end of the recording, the track, the song you're listening to, you're telling your body, hey, I can do hard things. I can sit in one place. I can, take my attention off of my phone. I can take my attention off of all the things that I need to do. And it's really about overcoming yourself. And overcoming yourself is, in my opinion, the best way to build resilience in the world outside of, obviously eating in a way that supports your brain. I think they go together because you eat in a way that decreases brain inflammation and gives your brain nutrients that it needs to function optimally. And then you do a practice like meditation where you are basically you're creating space for you to have more resilience, because you're not focused on things that would be taking up energy. When something takes up energy, it's something that you have to recover from, and therefore it tests your resilience. Especially at the beginning, when I started my practice, sitting in meditation was one of the hardest things for me to do. It felt aimless. It felt like nothing was happening. And even still, I just kept doing it. I realized that the magic of it is that nothing is happening because I'm slowing my brain down. I'm, like I said, quieting my mind and giving my body resources to put to other tasks. For people in chronic illness situations, this is essential. The tiniest little things you can do to increase your energy can be the difference between you making it through your workday without a mental breakdown or having a really, really rough day. For me, it might have been the difference between tolerating food or having a massive symptom flare-up after a meal. When I would meditate, when I would start my day, getting myself out of the normal thinking patterns, or even still, when I start my day with meditation and get myself out of those normal thinking patterns, like, oh my God, I have to do this. I have to call this person. I need to post this thing on social media. I need to even sit down and record my podcast and prep and all that, all of the tasks that we're sort of organizing and figuring out how to do in our brain. That all takes energy. And when I disconnect from that, even for just 5 or 10 minutes, I find it has a massive impact on how I approach my day. I feel less emotionally involved and less attached to all these things. It really helps me feel like I have more resources to put towards these things. There's so many amazing benefits to meditation, and especially as I've evolved my practice over many years. But at a basic level, it's about calming down that thinking mind. As much as it feels like it, we are not the thinking mind. And it's very, very easy to think, I am my thoughts. I am this person who is thinking about these things. When we sit in meditation, we change our brain waves and we slow them down. I'm just going to go through 3 of them. So beta is like your thinking brain. That is, it's the fastest brain waves. Alpha is slower than beta. That's kind of like daydreaming would be the best way to describe alpha. And then theta is a little slower than alpha, and that's really kind of like flow state is theta. So when we sit in meditation and we either focus on our breathing or focus on the space around us or focus on, not focus on the sensations in our body, but just focus on kind of how our body is occupying the space that it's in. I know that one's a little weird, but it's the best way I can describe it. When we do those things, our brainwaves change. They've been shown to go into more alpha and theta states, and increased alpha waves have been shown to reduce anxiety in people with generalized anxiety disorder. And now meditation helps me with the anxiety a lot, and it was a huge tool for me when I was sick and really was dealing it on a more intense and more regular basis. And it really helped, especially when I did it first thing in the morning. I achieved a few things when I would meditate first thing in the morning. And I still do because that's when I do it. I do it first thing in the morning. So I would achieve a non-physical way of overcoming myself, and I would change my brainwaves into a healthy state. So that's two things that are building resilience right there. I don't know what just happened with that. Um, so that's two things that are building resilience because I'm telling myself I can overcome desires that I have, and I can overcome wants, and I can overcome my thoughts, and I'm changing my brainwaves. And I think for someone like me who was an athlete growing up, doing things to overcome myself in a non-physical way was really important because I knew the value of pushing myself physically. When playing tennis matches, you kind of get down into like the third set. You've been out there for 3.5 hours, and it's like, all right, how much resilience do we got here? Mentally, can I stick with it? Physically, can I get my body to just keep going even when I wanted to stop? And so I knew about overcoming myself in that realm, but in all honesty, it's harder to overcome yourself when you have to sit down for like an hour and a half, or that's my practice is like an hour to an hour and a half a day, and sitting down and overcoming myself in that is way harder than just like being in a tennis match, because at the tennis match there's sort of this defined goal that I'm working towards. I want to win the match, and I have to play each point and these tiny little tasks that I can just kind of add up until I get to the end. But in meditation, there's like, when you become really present, the thinking mind is like, I want to stop this. Like, I want to go do things. I want to think about things. I want to think about the show that I watched last night. I want to think about, all the things that I could be missing on Instagram, or I wonder what my friends did last night. And overcoming that is freaking hard, and it's really uncomfortable, but it's so good. And doing that first thing in the morning really just sets me up to have an awesome day. So when I was starting out my meditation, I would, like I said, I'd simply just focus on the space around my body. Focusing on the space because it's not physical, but it is something, like it's nothing, but it's something, is the easiest way to change the brainwaves and take a step back from the thinking mind. Even if that space feels like it's only this far away, like it's an inch away from your body, and it's almost like you're wearing this tiny little coat of nothingness, that's awesome. It's more so about taking the attention off of your thoughts and putting it elsewhere. And that's why you can actually use your body, not to feel the sensations, but like I said, to kind of feel how it occupies space. And it's really simple. Not easy, but it's really simple, and it can only, it really only needs to be a few minutes to start, because again, it's about evolving and building the practice and making this a habit that you do every day, as opposed to being like, oh my God, I did 1 hour and a half long meditation, but that I didn't do another one for 2.5 weeks because it was so difficult. I believe in the consistency of the habits more so than necessarily the duration or the intensity of them. 5 good minutes every day is way better than an hour a month, in my opinion. Kind of along this line, another super easy way to induce the alpha and theta states of consciousness is by using kaleidoscopes. There's this really cool app that I found called Mesmerize that has a bunch of different kaleidoscopes and visuals paired with calming music or meditations. I think there's actually a thing on there where they tell you stories. And they have settings for anxiety, sleep, stress relief, depression, productivity, all sorts of stuff. I've used the kaleidoscope a few times in the past, and I have loved it. At a meditation retreat that I've gone to, they've used kaleidoscopes to kind of help induce those brainwaves, and I've used the app, and it's really cool because yes, these patterns have been shown to induce theta and alpha brain states, but getting lost in the patterns is so like awe-inspiring. And especially recently, I've been really captivated by the emotion of awe and wonder, and how important it is for us to feel it. And realizing that when we're in high stress states, when we're in high beta brain waves, Our brains are moving so fast trying to predict everything that we lose the ability to feel awe and wonder. And finding little ways to bring that back into our day, like just looking at the kaleidoscope, and even if you're not like drooling and like your head's not bobbing, because you're so lost in the pattern, but just like looking at it and being like, this is beautiful. Like the way, these different shapes are moving and spinning, and you don't know what the next pattern that's going to come up. And even just being like, wow, that is so beautiful. And using that to help us feel the feeling of awe and wonder is so valuable. And opening up to those emotions creates space for us to take in more information. My favorite example of this is when I first moved to Arizona in 2021, I went and I hiked Sedona all by myself. Not all of Sedona because there's a shit ton of trails, but I hiked one of the trails. And I remember I got up to the top of the mountain and I looked down into the valley and like seeing the expansiveness, the green, the red, the colors, the little animals running around, the sunset. It was so beautiful and it was so awe-inspiring. And when I think back to situations like that or other hikes that I've done or really, being out in nature, sunset, kind of the colors and the patterns and all of these things that are actually in a weird way very similar to the kaleidoscopes, I don't remember thinking about much in those things. It was just like, wow, this is fantastic. And really just taking it all in. And that's when we experience awe. And accepting those emotions can help us become more receptive and loving to our environment, to our loved ones, and to ourselves. When you feel awe, that's energy that's being freed up because we're not using it to think about things. We're not using it to criticize. We're not trying to be perfect. We're not trying to control those around us. It actually, for me, has made relationships and people, easier to navigate. Meditation, when you fall really deep into it, you do open yourself up to sort of the wonder of what it's like to have your eyes closed and not see anything, but feel all these different things come up. And same thing with the kaleidoscope. You're not able to predict the way the patterns are going to shift. Again, it may seem a little counterintuitive because you're not really doing anything, but you are creating resilience because it's creating space in your mind and in your brain. And that space allows energy to be used more efficiently and for things that need it, as opposed to, again, our thoughts, all the chatter in the brain. Like that's not a really efficient use of energy, especially, when our bodies, when they are in chronic illness states, don't have a huge abundance of that energy. Every little droplet of it is really important. So as far as simple but not necessarily easy things we can all do to build more resilience in our brains, avoiding those inflammatory omega-6, seed oil, linoleic acid fats is one, and doing some meditation and doing some things to get access to these different brain waves are two things that I've found in my life have had an outsized impact on my brain function. That's really all I can say about it. I do know, well, the meditation's different because I know a whole community of people who really it's changed a lot of people's brains who I've known or I know. And so, in terms of evidence that I've observed, that one definitely applies to more than me. But, for the seed oils, I think it's the same thing. Again, working with clients who eat really, really cleanly, especially if they've got like mold exposure or Lyme disease or all these, fatigue symptoms, brain fog, all that stuff. When they really clean up their eating and they really get away from these types of fats, their brain health improves. And again, it's about finding an individualized approach to it all. Because there is no one-size-fits-all diet. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to meditation. Everybody's going to have different emotions that come up when they try to meditate, and they're going to be hard for some to navigate, easy for others to navigate. And that's part of the beautiful thing about trying to improve our health is that it really is so individual. And it's it's so much fun for me because, I am the human experiment. I've tried so many things on this stuff, and how I feel is that's the results. I'm like, I did this thing. Did it help me? Did I feel good? Did I do it? I did it for a month. How did I feel? And sometimes things worked really well, and other times they didn't. But I think as frustrating as it can be for people in situations of chronic illness, especially, it is so individualized, and because of that, that's why I do coaching the way I do. And, I really use things like genetic testing. I use things like an organic acids test to measure different metabolites in your body. I use things like food inflammation tests to really get as much data about you, the individual, as I can, so that I can help you in the ways that you need, and be there with you on the journey, as opposed to saying, hey, I am a carnivore health coach, and everyone who comes to me, I just tell them to only eat meat. It's just not going to work for everybody. Working with someone who's an elite athlete is going to be way different than someone who has chronic fatigue and has a really hard time getting out of bed. And, I think for us coaches, it's so important to acknowledge that and really listen to our clients and take their situations into account, and work with them with where they're at. And so I have just launched a coaching program called the Genius Health Program, kind of in the same sort of line as this podcast, using science and, some spirituality and meditation, and combining those two worlds to help people, meet them where they're at, and use those tools to help them help themselves achieve the health goals that they want to. Because at the end of the day, I'm not healing you. You, whoever I work with, you are healing you. You are the one who's doing the work. I am just simply here for support, for advice when you need it, to ask you questions, to help you find the answers that you already have within you. And, that is how my coaching philosophy works. So if that is something that's interesting to you and you want to get a little more information, or share your story with me, you can DM me on Instagram at jappleton50. That would be the best way to get in contact with me. I'm really excited to be launching this program, and to be taking these concepts of genetics and spirituality, and the testing and the different lifestyle modifications we can do that, and pair it with the spiritual energetic side. I know it has the potential to really help people. It's helped me. It's helped clients that I've worked with. And so I'm just really excited about it. And so again, if you are interested, shoot me a DM. I am more than happy to chat more in depth about all of it. And, on that note, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope these 2 tactics to make your brain more resilient are helpful, and I will see you next time on Creating Genius.
Sounds